This is Just Listen, hosted by George. Today is September 22nd, 2025. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I want to talk about the U.S. federal government policy on crime and where we have stood since January of 2025. As you are aware of, there has been a lot of talk because of the National Guard being deployed by the current administration. Last week, I talked about certain aspects, and over the last couple of weeks, about why the current administration wanted to deploy troops to some of these cities. And I want to fine tune it now, starting with the policy on crime. So, laws, procedures, and agencies like the Department of Justice aim to reduce and prevent crime, particular offenses that cross state lines, involve federal interests, or target protected rights. So that's the big picture. Now I'm going to blend these in a second. Crimes against the government, interstate crimes like drug trafficking, human smuggling, and some forms of fraud, crimes on federal property, offenses committed on federal land such as national parks or post offices, or just federal buildings like courthouses, stuff like that. That came up in California in January, and I've talked about that. And that's when the National Guard was deployed. Now, the Department of Justice is the primary federal agency responsible for enforcing federal criminal law and prosecuting federal crimes. Now, the blend on that is if we talk about immigration and what the administration is doing, that's the blend of we have people who are here illegally, and that's a federal crime. So it would make sense that the Department of Justice would weigh in. Now, here's what's happening. We have seen through people talking in the mainstream media of saying that we can't pursue, deport, do things like that to people who are here illegally. And to blend it in with the crime, that's why they're being pursued in the first place. So again, it's a crime to be in the country illegally, and then the administration is only going to coming after people who have committed the crimes. Now, let me briefly talk about the National Guard again. Now, this has been pretty much an issue since January. So, President, to enforce U.S. laws, the president can call up the National Guard. We are already aware of that. Now, here's where we get into the weeds some. So there's something called the Posse Comitatus Act, which prohibits the use of U.S. military for civilian law enforcement. So to reiterate that, they can't be used for civilian law enforcement. But what they can do is protect federal property and personnel, enforce federal law, and then, of course, respond to national emergencies. But the focus with crime is protecting federal property and personnel. And in all cases where they have been deployed, the National Guard, that is what they're doing. Most times they don't even carry weapons. And if they do carry weapons, it has gone through the courts, and the courts have agreed, based on circumstances, that they can do it. Now, here's another focal point. I went and researched last week about the crime statistics. If you watch the mainstream media, they say that crime has gone down. Now, let me tell you something. In 2024 and 25, we have cities with high crime rates. Let's go through them. Memphis, Tennessee tops the list with a high crime rate of violent crimes. Detroit, Baltimore, Maryland, Kansas City, Missouri, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And in Milwaukee is homicides and rapes. That's where their big numbers are coming from now. Kansas City, violent offenses and a high number of homicides. Now, the other side keeps saying that the crime statistics have gone down. Depending on how you do that data, so when there with these stats right here, this is based on what the FBI collected, meaning that there was some kind of crime or violent crime or somebody was killed. It doesn't dig into how many of them were like federal offenses or misdemeanors and stuff like that. This is raw data. So what I'm saying is it might be a little bit more accurate than the stats that we're seeing with the mainstream media, because you can fudge those, especially like I told you, if you're 18 and younger and you commit a crime, it may not even be reported as a stat because they can make it a misdemeanor or say that it's sealed or just say that since it's going to come off and then be expunged when they turn 18, then they can get rid of it. Okay, so next, the states. We're talking about Alaska, Tennessee and Arkansas, New Mexico, Louisiana, District of Columbia. Now, with crime, you can see that some of the places where the National Guard is being sent in are places that have high crime. Memphis, Tennessee, Baltimore, Kansas City, District of Columbia. I remember from the 80s when crime was so high in DC, they talked about sending out the National Guard, but they didn't do it at that point. A lot of people forgot about that. Now, like I said, we're talking about violent crime, homicide, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault, burglary, and theft. Okay. Now, what we are getting bogged down in is who is committing the crime. I have said on several occasions we need to look at this as people violence when we're talking about crime. Here's why. A lot of people on both sides are getting into what somebody looks like, and then they break down the stats, and then what causes the friction in the country is we don't necessarily, or in my view, this is an opinion, it doesn't matter what the person looks like. It's American crime. Once we get into the weeds of how many people are incarcerated based on race and other things, that's when the atmosphere of trying to figure out how to address it stops. And then we're in a shouting match because it is in the urban areas Then we talk about what the people look like, etc. And what keeps happening is we just want to throw money at it because prior to the president taking office, there were a lot of programs out there that I mentioned that were basically community policing. Now, when you're talking about crime and policing, the other side thinks that community policing works. You can judge that for yourself. Now, all of these blend together because crime in DC, for example, in California, when there were riots, didn't stop until the National Guard was deployed. And it stayed low while they were there. What is interesting since I'm on the border of Missouri, but I'm actually in Illinois, I can monitor what's going on in both of these states. If you watch the news, you should not be surprised that the politicians are saying that crime is going down. Well, if it's going down, that's one thing, but don't you want to still address the problems currently going on and then look at what they are reporting? The bottom line is there shouldn't be any crime. It should only be crimes like every 6 months or something like that. And that's a mindset that, based on all the data I have seen, needs to be changed because all crime is bad. There have been, remember the skater, remember the volleyball lady who got attacked or hit by a car? And for someone to say, well, crime is going down, that doesn't seem very responsible, because if crime is going down, these same politicians are not decreasing their security staffs. And if they did, maybe I would feel like that they were addressing the crime better. And with crime, we're killing each other with the stats and what people look like. As I said previously, this is American crime, and the only way to solve it is to look at it as an American problem. Then you look at what is driving people's motivation to want to commit these crimes, especially with the homicides. And like I told you last week, these labels, in my opinion, don't help anything except to divide us more when we're looking at how to solve the issue. Crime is a huge issue in the United States. It's been that way for 50 years. I've been alive 61 years. I remember watching the news. I lived in Concord, North Carolina, and every day on the news, they would talk about murders in Charlotte, North Carolina. Every day I heard that. The only time I didn't hear about a lot of crime was when I was in Germany. Maybe there was a crime every other year or something like that. So that's what I'm saying. We need to look at it from an American perspective. Maybe deploying the National Guard to make people accountable, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we should consider, especially if you are elected, getting some help so that people, individuals, other humans know that you are serious and they consider the consequences when they are doing these acts. This is Just Listen, hosted by George. Next week, I will be doing a live podcast, so I'm really excited about that. So then we can interact more. Let me know what you think. Have a great day.